So, one, just thanks everyone for coming to this. I think we're excited to have a chat about social media and how we can use that to help better communicate our science and reach out to people that are outside of our field. But before we get into that, I just wanted to make a couple points. One, if you aren't already on our email list, I'll just type my email here. Send me an email if you're interested in joining our email list, and we can add you to that. That's probably the best way, just to stay up to date on our events and things that we have going on the rest of the semester. So on that, we do have just kind of two big primary things that we're planning to do the rest of the semester. We're planning on the big thing is in April. I think we've tried to set a date where we're still working out the details, but probably April 3rd, which is a Monday, we're going to try and make a day trip to Des Moines to set up some meetings with some of the state legislators and talk to them about our science. We can come up maybe with some issues that we'd be interested in discussing with them. But we're going to have a more of a, I guess, like field trip to Des Moines. We're going to plan to hopefully rent a vehicle from the university and make a trip down there as a group. And then the other thing is leading up to that, we still have to set a date for this, but we're planning on having another virtual meeting, but this time we'll talk to someone from the university's government relations team about how to speak with legislators, set up meetings, create like handouts, things like that, leading up to that Des Moines trip. So we'll be able to learn about how to do that and then practice it in person. I think those are the main just events we have coming up. So again, stay tuned to the email list. That's probably the best way to hear about when we get more specifics with those figured out. But I think for now, I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who you are a social media manager for the university. Is that correct? So I think you're going to talk to us a little bit about how we can use social media, with our science and use it to communicate the science. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I have a little PowerPoint that I can sort of use to help guide this first part of our conversation. And then I've left lots of time for us to just talk, and you can ask questions and we can get really specific about certain things if you like. So I don't know if can I share my screen yet, Riley? Okay, cool. All right. Okay. So this presentation is something that I have adapted a little bit from a workshop I did with some faculty last summer about communicating about their research. So a lot of what the way I'm going to present this, it could really work for anyone in any field in talking about their research. I imagine that as we get into more like question and answer part of today, that's where we can get really specific about science. But since I am not a scientist and that's not my field of expertise, this is more about what I know about how to take what you do and make it work on social media and some best practices that way. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of like that first step. And some of you may already be past this, but it's that point where you're trying to decide, do you need to create a new channel on a different platform? And these are just some important questions that can guide you. I also just want to sort of frame this around why it's important to be on social media. Yeah, I think a lot of you already probably understand that on some level, but for example, it is a great way for you to follow industry trends and breaking news, learn from the other experts in your industry and feel more connected to them, obviously sharing your work and research more broadly. Something that a lot of people, like, we encourage them to think about the way they're participating in social media is like making yourself a thought leader, contributing like original takes on issues, or really just presenting something that is unique into the dialogue around your research, the topic, whatever, and strengthening your own digital brand, how you are perceived on the internet, basically. So a few things that you'll hopefully accomplish in creating a social media channel or strengthening your presence on a social media channel is, of course, raising awareness, protecting your brand. Ideally, I imagine that a big part of what you're hoping for is increasing engagement. And when we talk about engagement, that's everything from likes and comments to shares and link clicks. Sometimes it's not always immediately apparent to someone who might be looking at your content what your level of engagement is, but it's basically the percentage of the people who see what you're posting, how many of them engage with it on some level. Do they save it? Do they share it? Do they click on it? Do they respond to it? Another goal might be driving people to your website or some other form of content that you have somewhere on the internet. You may be interested in providing some sort of level of customer service. And that could look like a lot of different things in science. When we talk about customer service, it may just be about connecting with someone who has something at stake in whatever it is that you are working with. And of course, I imagine that you hope to create some added value for the people who engage with your content that they can't get anywhere else. It's that something that comes from whoever you are, uniquely you, your voice, your perspective, just whatever it is that you add to the conversation. So a couple of things that you're going to want to consider as you're thinking about whether it's creating a new channel or just ramping up your strategy around how you're using a certain channel, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, maybe TikTok. What kind of resources do you have available? Your resources are your time, your energy, just like your mental bandwidth. How much can you really handle taking on here and devoting to managing your social media presence, the volume of content, and then that sort of leads you then to what can you realistically expect yourself to be creating in terms of volume? How much? How often are you going to be posting? Obviously, you're going to really want to think about the kind of content that you're going to be posting. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And one of the most important things is your audience and being really acutely aware of who is seeing your content and who you want to be seeing your content. Whom are you creating this content for? Okay. So I kind of had this next part. It's broken down into 8 tips. Again, these are more broad and you can sort of think for yourself about how you might apply them to specific social media channels. And again, when we get into the question and answer, it might be a time for us to say, okay, related to this idea, how would I do this on Instagram? How would I handle this on Twitter? We can get into that in a little bit. So I mentioned identifying your audience is one of the most important things. It's certainly something like on our team when we're creating content for the university, it is the most central. We're very mindful of who our audience is on each platform. And no surprise, everyone is not an audience. And you probably already know this, but you don't need to be trying to reach everyone or please everyone or interest everyone. Instead, here are some questions to ask yourself. Who are you trying to reach? And which social media channels are you already using? Which ones do you feel comfortable with? Do you feel really well versed in how things work on that channel? And also, what channels are your target audience? Those people that you want to reach, where are they? Are they on Twitter? Are they on Instagram? Are they on Facebook? It depends. And those audiences have shifted a little bit in the last couple of years. So you probably already know, where are your peers? Where are the people that you want to be connecting with? And what kind of content are you publishing? Are you trying to direct people to articles, video? Do you have a lot of images that go along with your research? Be mindful of those things, and where do they work best? Who's going to be most interested in that kind of content? And then in identifying your audience, knowing who they are, one of the most important things is really listening to your audience, paying attention to the feedback that you are getting from them in the ways they engage with your content, in the ways you see them engaging with others' content. What sorts of conversations are happening on the social media platforms where you want to be? Just listen, pay attention, get to know your audience. You probably are part of that audience in a lot of times. So here's an action item for you, which you may already do, but you can actually go ahead and set up Google alerts for certain topics, which will help really keep your finger on the pulse of what is happening. If you're not already, follow relevant accounts, maybe even take some time to do a search. If there are certain people who you notice are getting a lot of engagement in your field of research, not only pay attention to what they're doing, but who are they following and who are they engaging with? You may be interested in following them as well. And of course, you can always from time to time do a search online and see what else is out there. Sharing is, of course, a really important part of maintaining your social media presence. And you're going to share probably a lot of different kinds of content. Sometimes you're just going to share an article. Sometimes you're going to share a hot take on something. Sometimes you may want to just contribute a nugget of information that from your position and your level of expertise, you are a really great source of that information. Sometimes you'll be creating content and sharing it that does all of these things. So an action item, just sort of like to get into the practice of doing this, go ahead and share something with your network or participate in an online conversation where you have a chance to do these things. So you'll want to think about what is your tone in the content that you're creating on certain channels. We say, like, talk online like you would talk to your colleagues, like you would talk to your peers. Go ahead and let your personality come through online. That's the stuff that's going to make you stand out and help people actually feel connected to you and your unique perspective when they feel like it's a person that they're talking to and not just a set of statistics or numbers or facts. Yeah, so whatever that might be. You may also notice that your tone in the things that you would post on Instagram could be really different than the tone of the things that you post on Facebook. For us, like when we're posting to this university social media channels, the tone that we're trying to strike on Instagram when we're primarily talking to current and prospective undergraduate students and like recent alums is pretty different from when we're on Facebook, where the majority of our audience is like 50 years old and up. So, we're really mindful of that. When we were on TikTok, before we stopped posting to TikTok, again, our tone was completely different because we were trying to connect mostly with 13 to 17-year-olds. So you're going to be, you really want to think about it's in enough authentically, how can you be yourself in a way that also connects with the audience that you have on each platform? As you do these things, you'll find that building connections is more important than your followers. I'd mentioned before, like the engagement rate, and that's the percentage of the people who see your content that engage with it. If only 10 people see your content, but you get 5 engagements, that's a 50% engagement rate, and that's fantastic. Okay. And interestingly, on a lot of the platforms, when you get that higher engagement rate, just from like the number of people who see what you're posting to how like the number that engage, the algorithm will often reward you for that and start showing it to more people anyway. So those real authentic connections where you're being your authentic self, your voice is coming through, you're offering something of value to your audience and they're engaging and connecting with it, eventually that will lead to followers. And that's why it is so much more important than having lots of followers. That's why like we would never, for example, we don't engage in practices of going out and just trying to like get as many followers as possible. Instead, we like on our team, we're very focused on connecting with the audience that we have. And that really rewards us tenfold. And that would be true for anybody on any social media platform. Connecting and building community with the audience that you have is going to be a lot more valuable and generate a lot more engagement for you, and probably be a lot more rewarding and fun than trying to connect with an audience that may or may not be all that interested in what you want to hear. All right. Which sort of leads us to, okay, well, what kind of content is that then? What is valuable content? Your content should educate, engage, and entertain. It doesn't need to be so super serious. Sometimes you will be talking about something that is really serious and important. But it should also be presented in a way that is interesting. How can you make something interesting? Well, a lot of times, just the way people engage with social media they're really connected to visual content. If there's any kind of image that you can correlate to what you're talking about, that's often very helpful. If there's some kind of like very short video clip, 5 to 10 seconds, that helps illustrate what you're trying to talk about, super valuable, really helpful. If it's not highly visual, if there's nothing you can do, what are some other ways that you can really connect with the most interesting, most profound nugget of information that you can share that would really grab somebody's attention and get them excited to know more? You don't want to go dormant. And this can be hard. I imagine, if you are in the zone, if you're just really deep into your research and you're very focused on it, or you're up against a tight deadline, or you're feeling a lot of pressure and there's a lot of things going on, it may be really hard to maintain your social media presence when that's not the thing that's really pulling at your attention the most. But it's really important. And it's not just about posting, it's actually about being present in general. So it might be helpful for you to commit to just being active online for 15 minutes a day. And that doesn't need to be posting or spending time creating content 15 minutes a day. It could be that you're committing 15 minutes to listening and engaging with the content that is out there and building community that way, so that you are still a presence online. You don't necessarily have to be the person who's always generating the content, as long as you are still a voice that's contributing to the conversation in some way by being present. And then the 80-20 rule is something that probably is applicable to a lot of parts of your life. But think of it this way: who wants to follow someone who talks about themselves all the time? So we encourage you to consider following the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the content that you share is not directly related to your work. Instead, it's you maybe offering some perspectives, or propping up the research of someone else in your field, or moving the conversation forward around big ideas that are happening in your field. And then 20% is you specifically talking about your research and your work. And then a few bonus best practices. Optimize your account. Write better bios. Think about how you can really leverage like those short little statements at the top of your profiles to communicate who you are in an engaging and an interesting way that make people want to connect with you. Maybe if there's a link to a website or something, you may want to include it there. You may want to consider creating an editorial or a content schedule. One, to sort of just help you organize your thoughts and your practices around this. And also just to like take some of the pressure off of like looking for something to post. Maybe you already kind of have an outline for like a month ahead. Here's some stuff that I'm going to share throughout the month. It's ready to go. And participate in trending moments or in moments where there's breaking news in your field. Be sure that you're engaging with the content that's being posted by others, that you are offering your unique perspective on what is happening. And there are also like other like sort of trends that kind of come up throughout the year in each field, just celebrating the field or certain players in the field. So be sure to participate in those. This is more for faculty, but if you, while you're here at the university, a really great resource is our branding website. There are templates and graphic elements and things like that that you are more than welcome to use, especially if whatever you're doing is directly affiliated with the university or like a lab that's at the university. So that is available to you. I will go ahead and send this presentation to Riley too, so he can share this and you can just click on that link. And we can go ahead and open it up to questions. I imagine that one of like the biggest areas of curiosity might be like what kind of content works best on each platform. And then we can also talk about maybe some best practices around how to do that, how to go about that, all of that. So yeah, I was like a lightning round, but yeah, ready to just sort of open it up now to a conversation.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there would be really interesting to go into. But first, Cody had a question in the chat, which is that regarding scientific information, what if the audience is, or I guess, Cody, if you wanted to ask that also, I could read it.
Yeah, so I guess the more I was trying to go for is, you said that you don't want to define your audience as everyone, there needs to be an actual definition. But I think it was important, especially what's hard in science, and what we've seen probably over the past with the pandemic, is sometimes we need to be able to reach as many people as possible, as much. And how would you try to define that other than everyone?
Yeah. Well, I do imagine that if you were to really like think about it, you probably could narrow it down to, okay, I really want to reach the people who don't know anything about this. And what I mean is the people who like have zero, like, or I really want to reach the people in this one demographic area because we recognize that there's just like a big knowledge gap here or something like that. But I think it will be helpful for you if you approach your social media strategy as really engaging with the community that you have online. And I think you will find that as you do that, and as you establish yourself as a presence, as an expert, as somebody who is reliable, and it has a lot of integrity, and we can trust this person. When you are contributing to a larger canon of voices that are saying this is important, and you all are sort of supporting each other and amplifying this really important message, it gets through the noise and it does start to reach other people. So I think it's helpful to really view yourself as in community with your peers, with the people who are going to connect with what you have to say, no matter what. And the more genuine connections you're generating in that way, the more it's going to rise up to the top and get seen by other people. So that would be I would encourage you to really focus on building genuine connections where they're happening, where they can happen. That would be my advice. I don't know if that is helpful.
I guess it kind of brought it upon because, so I'm Native American. A lot of my friends and family do not know science. They don't, like, a lot of my community doesn't know it. So like I'm more of a focal point and a contact between what they know and what's being talked about. So like it might be more of a unique problem for me in my situation.
Well, maybe, but I mean, you just actually like told me about a very specific audience. Like if those people are in your audience, that is who you're creating for. And I imagine that you would really be trying to create genuine connections with them. online. So when I say like the community that you have online, I don't actually just mean like just your peers. I'm truly suggesting that you look at who is following you, who are you engaging with online? And that includes your friends and your family and the people who are not in your profession, but are invested in the work that you are doing. So to me, I mean, that seems like a really great place to start is like, how can you create meaningful connections that bridge your work with this other community that you are also a part of? To me, that's it. It sounds like you are uniquely situated to have the perspective and the understanding to help build that bridge. So that would be my recommendation is to like really think about how you can create content that's going to do that.
And that kind of brought me into, I was working on a second question, is your advice on when you're online talking about, as if you're speaking with a colleague, again, being my still online connections are very much, if I were to do that, they would have no idea what I was talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So a better word would probably be your community, like how, yes. So if the jargon that you would typically use with your colleagues would just go over the heads of the people that you really want to create genuine connections with, then that's not the right way to go. And this is where like that listening piece comes into play and is so important. And you are uniquely situated to understand your audience in a way that nobody else really can. And like the very unique demographics that, intersect in your audience. So I think for you, it's more about being intentional about the way you speak online, the language that you use.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be curious if no one else has a unique question. Yeah, if you went into the specifics of like, obviously don't have to go through every single platform, but
Yeah.
kind of, I think we have like thoughts in our minds about which platforms have which audience and do, what kind of content might be better there. But as from someone that does it day to day, what your thoughts are on
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is in the sciences in particular, it's like one of the few fields where Twitter still feels like pretty relevant. Like there, for example, on campus, there are lots of departments where they're struggling to like maintain creating content for Twitter and they're not getting great engagement. And we often tell them, well, do you still have the resources to do this? Because if not, maybe you should be devoting your attention to the platforms where your audience actually is. But we do see like in the sciences in particular, especially in moments where there are big breakthroughs in research and there's like a lot of conversation happening, Twitter is often a place where that's happening. So I would say Twitter is definitely a place where you can definitely engage with your peers in the field. You can contribute to the conversation around breakthroughs in research and just meaningful moments in your field. It's often a great place to share your research, those quick little nuggets with a link that can lead you to more. Visual content does still perform pretty well on Twitter. So if there are images or video that can go along with what you're saying, that's great. If not, then it's just, I think, helpful to be really strategic about how you frame it in that short statement to encourage people to engage with it further. Instagram, I think, definitely lends itself well to all different fields of science, but it could be really time consuming for you to think about how you're creating content for that platform. It is one of the fastest growing social media platforms. The audience on Instagram is still growing faster than the others. All social media channels are growing continually. Although some of them their growth rate is slowing. Like Facebook, I think their growth rate has slowed for the first time since it started over the last year. But that doesn't mean people are using it less. It just means fewer people are joining at the rate that they were, which is why, like, we always say, like, Facebook is not irrelevant just because it's all like old people. But Instagram is a great place for you to really contribute your own voice, and largely because your own face will often be right there in the frame. If you are doing like a reel and talking about your experience and your research, you're right there talking to your audience. So you're definitely coming through, and your personality and your unique perspective is really readily apparent. But again, Instagram is super visual, so it's up to you to decide if you have the time and resources to devote to posting and engaging regularly on Instagram. Facebook is probably where I would say for the science community, might be a little bit harder to generate community through like a page or something like that. But it could still be a place where on a personal profile, you might find some meaningful connections with people in your field. Those connections could lead to other content that you could create elsewhere that might be really important to your field. So that would be sort of my hot take on, in a very painting very broad strokes, audiences on sort of the big three social media platforms. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I have a quick follow-up on that. You mentioned like creating a page. Do you think it's worth, if someone is interested in following this and reaching out more over social media, to create an account specifically to that, or is using like personal accounts fine as well?
I would discourage that as much as possible. I think you're going to find a much higher level of engagement when people feel like they're connecting with a person and not and like a sort of vague, anonymous like organization or group of people, but I don't know who they all are. I think like when we look at like influencer culture, for example, just the way people are using social media right now, they really want to connect to people. So I would highly encourage you, especially if your goal is to communicate your research and have it reach a larger number of people, that it comes from you and your voice. And we see that all, especially on Twitter and Instagram. Really prominent people in their fields speaking in their own voice behind their own name on their own profiles. So that would be my recommendation.
Then one last follow-up on that. I'd be curious, this might be a little more relevant for the Twitter side of things, at least from my experience. A lot of times we'll create a Twitter account to follow a bunch of other accounts, and then you may not have a whole lot of followers yourself, quite as much as something like a Facebook or an Instagram. Do you have good recommendations on how to like start reaching out to other people that we think might be our community, like tweeting at other people or replying to?
Yeah. I think, retweeting stuff, comment, like replying to stuff and joining in a conversation on Twitter, it inserts you into the conversation. It starts to help you generate some name recognition. And that would absolutely contribute to you growing a following over time. The generating community is not just something that it shouldn't just happen on your own profile. It largely is happening in the things that you are doing on the platform, engaging with other people, and creating genuine connections within the community that you are a part of. It's not that you're just cultivating a community, you're participating in the community.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had another question. Did you want to ask that? Ishalani, or do you want me to read that out?
Yeah, sure, I can. So, how do you think is the traction level on the Instagram collaboration? Like, there are organization pages plus there are personal pages. So, where do you
Mhm.
think the collaboration posts are reaching to? Is it really gaining the traction level or something like that? Would you prefer to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, in our experience, it can be it's a really helpful way. If you have a strong connection to an organization and you have an agreement to we're going to do this collaboration post, the beauty of it is that when you do that, it gets shown to all of your followers and it gets shown to all of theirs. And if you're doing a collaboration post with someone who has 100,000 followers and you have maybe two or three, or maybe you only have like 500 or fewer, it can be a really wonderful way for your perspective and your insight to reach a much broader audience. And you may find that when you do that, you do build a much larger following. And even if you don't, you do build some name recognition, some, a reputation, some credibility in the field when you do that. We see really great engagement levels when we do collaboration posts, for example. And we also see that the following of those other, like when we do them, like we do them with other entities on campus, that their following grows as well. And their engagement level does seem to increase even after the fact. So I think they're great. And they'll be born out of you establishing real, meaningful, genuine connections with those organizations or those other entities that you do collaboration posts on. And you build up to a point where it's a good fit to do a collaboration post.
Thanks. I have a follow-up question on when you say like building up genuine connections. So, what do you think is something that a person from the technical community is going to check on us having a portfolio or as a page that we are communicating with them? What is that thing that you are telling me like this is what is going to build you genuine connection? Is it just the content or is it that the personal portfolio of a person who's keep on posting it?
I think it's probably a little bit of like a soup that has some of all of that contributing to it. You know, the more you're sharing about your own research and sort of providing some insight into what is your portfolio, like what is your level of experience and your level like of expertise, the more you're sharing about that, the more credibility you're going to build for yourself. Also, the way you talk about it, is it engaging? Is it interesting? Are you able to communicate about it in a way that people want to continue listening to you and learning more? Do other people care about what you have to say? Because if other people care, well, then maybe I should care and I want to know more. And so it's a little bit of all of that. And it's sort of like a relationship, really, that you are in relationship with your audience. You are listening to them and responding to them, and you're giving them information, and you're establishing yourself and building trust in that relationship by offering up, here's what I know, here's where I've been successful, here's what I have to say about that. And as you do that, well, then maybe another expert weighs in and says, yes, exactly. And so it's pretty dynamic. I don't think it's like a static like formula and here's you do these things and here's what a genuine connection looks like, but it's a little bit more fluid than that. And I think all of those things kind of intersect to help support that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, you did. I have one more question on like what Cody was asking. So when you talk about a new organization or a person who is going to be fresh to the social media page and they're going to start talking about the content, what do you think they're going to work on? Like just building the connections or how would be the marketing strategies has to be there?
I think, well, you can kind of go back and look at sort of how I walked you through like those original questions to ask yourself as you're thinking about what you're going to put out there first. But I think pay attention to one, what's important to you? What do you want to say? What do you really want to get out there. Okay, well, I think you start there. If it's important to you, it's meaningful to you, then it's going to come across sincerely. So I would start by sharing the stuff that matters to you. Pay attention to the way other people are talking about similar kinds of things, and maybe that can influence how you talk about it. And also engage with other people who are contributing to the conversation around this topic, this research in your field, so that you are a presence on the platform, not just on your own profile. But it's kind of like just do the thing and experiment a little bit. It's not always going to work. You might post 10 things and they hardly get any engagement at all at first, but that's not going to happen every time. And you kind of just sort of keep it. It's a little bit of a science in that you're experimenting and you're tweaking and you're adjusting until you find something that's working for a little while, and you get into a bit of a groove, and you've established some regular people that you find that you're connecting with all the time. And it's really bringing some exciting stuff up to the surface. And then something might shift and you have to adjust again. That's the nature of social media, is that it is always evolving. But I think get in there and do it, and start noticing what's happening, what's working, what is not quite working, and make adjustments as necessary until you find yourself into a little bit of a groove where you feel like, I feel like I'm being genuine. I feel like I'm being authentic. I feel like I'm building some trust and some community. This is working right now, and I'm going to kind of keep going about it this way for a bit. I hope that answers your question, but feel free to follow up.
Yeah, sure. Pretty much it's like on the generic answer. So maybe like as specific as it, as you said, like I have to get started with that. And maybe on the time I could understand, okay, this is where it is working, this is where it is not. So
Yeah.
the strategizing is something that would be specific, and maybe I need to work on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also like want to share, like, I'm sensitive to the fact that like this is time consuming, and it could seem a little overwhelming because it's not, you're all really busy and very invested in the work that you're doing. And it might feel like, I don't know that I have the bandwidth to devote so much time to my social media presence. And that's why it's okay to say, I'm going to be on Instagram, or I'm just going to be on Twitter. And here's how much time I have to devote to that for now. And that's okay. That's absolutely fine.
Kind of on that vein a little bit, I'd be curious, especially someone just getting started, I think it can be kind of intimidating, I guess, to put yourself out there, especially with imposter syndrome being such a big part of the field, unfortunately. And wonder if you have tips on how to, I guess, manage that as just starting out and putting yourself and your work in such a public setting.
Well, I think it a little bit goes back to the same, like where I said, pay attention to what you care about right now. Also, like, well, what excites you, and what do you get excited about talking about, and that you can talk about with authority? Or maybe you're really excited about something that you don't have all the answers to yet, and you kind of want to share about that. And the thing that you are curious, here's the thing that you are really curious about. I think maybe demystifying a little bit of that, and pulling back the curtain a bit on, here's where I'm stuck. Here's where I'm really excited and things are working right now. Here's where I'm very curious and I want to know what other people think. Those are all like great places to start generating lots of engagement and connection online. In particular, anytime you pose any kind of question or leave something open to others to contribute their own ideas and perspectives, is going to be really meaningful, and also doesn't always position you as the expert or the authority, which I think can help alleviate some of that imposter syndrome a little bit.
Sort of continuing that, do you have recommendations on how to handle negative comments, or to know, like, I'm sure there's a fine line between engaging and going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, totally. So we always recommend, if somebody is putting out like blatant misinformation, this something that is completely untrue in a response to something that you've shared, simply correct the information, lay out what is true or real or whatever it may be, and then you probably won't engage again. Because if it's a person that's looking to spread more information or just engage you in, like, they're looking to fight about something, nothing you say is going to change their mind. They're not interested in having a conversation. They are having so much fun just being mad. So go ahead, state for the record, correct the misinformation, and then you probably can leave it. So that's like one thing. And you can also like let it go then, because it's like not personal. It's not about you at all. It's not really about your research. It's about something that person is working through. If you get criticism on your work, my recommendation is usually to try and engage in the same way that you would in a conversation in person, where you kind of can acknowledge where a person is coming from or thank them for sharing their perspective. And you can decide if you have the bandwidth to engage with them further. And sometimes for your own peace of mind, you don't have to engage with them at all. You don't have to. It's really entirely up to you. In the same way that, it happens out in the real world, you don't have to engage with every person who comes at you with whatever they come at you with. If you don't see a place to have any kind of meaningful resolution come out of the conversation, then I don't think that you need to engage with it. And that's something we encounter so much, like at the university level. We see a lot of we're also like bound by like free speech laws and things like that because we're a taxpayer funded public institution. So it gets really, really, really frustrating. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we're beating our heads against the wall at like how really terrible some people are and the things they say and do online. And we also know there is nothing we could do or say that is going to change their mind, help them be a better person. So I think, protect your own self and how when you think about what level you want to engage with people. If it's constructive criticism or somebody wants to engage in a real conversation around differences of opinion or thought, and you are interested in having that conversation, I say go for it, because that can be really, really interesting for other people too, to see how people in the field are working through some of the ideas. But I think you definitely don't need to feel the pressure to respond to everybody at all. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. Do have a few more things I could ask, but I wanted to make sure. Any pressing questions? One from Helen. I don't know if you want to ask that, or I can read that out.
I think it's just a comment.
Oh, just a comment there. All right.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I can I'll go ahead and put my email in here, and feel free at any time to reach out if you have a specific question. Be more than happy to write you back, or even schedule a time to chat on the phone if it's a bigger question.
Awesome, thanks. Oh yeah, Shivani, do you have something?
Yes. So, when you're actually building a portfolio, how important it is to have your own site or your own website where you're talking about your work or what you're communicating, and how important it is, and down the line, when do you think you need that?
That is probably not I may not be the right person to tell you that. That might be something to talk through maybe with like a mentor or your colleagues. As for best practices in your field, I do not think that to have an engaging and dynamic social media presence, you have to have your own website at all. I don't think that those two things go hand in hand. But you know, that's probably more, and the standards are probably different in different fields. So, I would say maybe reach out to somebody that you trust or respect in your field to talk through that idea.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone else has questions, feel free to ask, but I have one, I guess, final one I'd be curious about. So I know like you talk about Twitter is still relevant in the sciences, and I know Twitter's been in the news a lot recently, with, you know, all the drama around that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still see it in the future as being a relevant platform? Are there other platforms that are like emerging that might, I guess, take its place or also enter the same space that
Yeah.
it's in?
Well, I don't know about like new platforms. Something new will come along. Something always does. Don't know what it will be yet. And I who knows what Twitter's going to look like 6 months, a year from now. I don't know. We're entering an election cycle that turns Twitter into a little bit of a monster, or at least it has historically. I don't know. I do know like what we see is people are using Twitter less, just in general. And I think that the pandemic probably contributed to a lot of that. It became a place where people went there looking for validation and nobody found it, and it made them mad. So like, for example, on the university's Twitter account, just our reach in general, like we have one of the most successful social media teams in all of higher ed. Like we have the best engagement in all of like Division I colleges and universities in the country, and our reach on Twitter is a fraction of what it used to be. As well as the engagement. It's just that fewer people are on the platform. But we've been talking a lot about this, and we were like, well, what do people use Twitter for? And they use it when when something happens and they want current, like down to the minute, it hasn't even hit like the news cycle really yet, breaking news, they want to go and engage and get information. And also and not just like tragedies or disasters or things like that, but when there are big exciting breakthroughs, people will go there to engage with people right away who are in the thick of it. So I feel like it does still play a role there, and that's maybe why, especially in the sciences, it seems to still be relevant. That being said, I think the way Instagram has evolved and become very much about individuals sharing their unique perspectives and their personal experience, Instagram might be a really great place to invest your time. It's a very, very diverse community, and there's also lots of different ways to share content and reach people. And the platform also seems invested in supporting that for a while, it felt very much like they were trying to be TikTok. And it feels more and more like, while they do really want to encourage users to create video, it's not so much about these like trends and these like quick little short-lived stints at fame, but more about like almost mini vlogging in a way. Is something that like we see that platform really bending toward, and that could really lend itself well to sharing about your research, or your place in the various science communities that you are a part of. So Instagram seems pretty stable. It's evolving a little bit, but not at a pace that seems impossible to keep up with. So that's and that's just my 2 cents. Yeah. So Twitter does not seem stable, I guess, to answer your question. Neither does TikTok. Who knows if like TikTok will even be like legal in this country 6 months from now. So to me, Instagram feels stable. It's not going anywhere. It could be a great place to devote your attention if that's something you're being mindful of.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for the information and the insights. It's really
Yeah.
helpful. I think we're running up on the 10:30 now, so end of the meeting. But yeah, thanks so much for willing to talk to us. I think there was a lot of really
Absolutely.
useful information.
I hope so. If you have follow-up questions or think of something else after the fact, like I said, feel free to reach out. Or if you encounter a spot where you just want to talk through something, even if it's 6 months from now, feel free to reach out. So,
Oh, great. Yeah, I'll make sure to share your email. So yeah, thanks for being willing to do that.
yeah. All right. I'll also I'll share that PowerPoint with you in case people would like to have that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I can attach that to an email. So
Okay. Cool.
all right, well, thanks so much. It was nice
Yeah.
meeting you.
Thanks everyone. It was nice to meet you.
All right.